There are 14th Amendment citizens. This is the Constitution.
Listen, the most lawless people of America are in government. Anyone in government who does not uphold the Constitution, both state and federal, are lawless.
My name is Christopher Gronsky. I live in New Hampshire. Live free or die, you know.
He has helped Americans from around the world eliminate their income tax liability through his passport process.
It's like once you see the matrix, you can't unsee it. It's just there, okay?
Always wanting something.
Welcome to Destination Freedom. I'm Christopher Gronsky, and I'm glad you're on tonight. This is a little bit of a different venue tonight. We're going to be discussing some of the things that the comments and the questions that they have on some of the TikTok videos that were created, thanks to my son Michael and some of that work. So I want to just, I have some things that I printed out and some of the paperwork I have. It makes it easy just to reference these things. I just want to let you know that I have a live class coming up on Saturday, November the 8th. I'm going to do a live online class. So if you like to take the state citizenship class, right now that class is $385. It's a 6-hour class. It's pretty long. And we get into talking about, we'll end up talking about the Declaration of Independence. We'll talk about liberty and freedom. We'll move into discussing what was written in the Declaration of Independence, what created the states and all, and then that these states created the federal government and its limitations and things like that. And we'll end up in the tax code, where we'll look at who the tax code is for from the tax code itself, and it says who that is. So we get to go over all those ideas in this 6-hour class. It is our foundational class because if you're going to do a passport process with us, then you should understand why you're doing it, and if you're creating a tax liability for yourself. And so we'll talk a little bit about those particulars on tonight's call. And Michael, if you could get me that 7701, that'll be great. I just printed out the tax code in section 7701. We'll be making reference to some of that. And but I want to get into some of the particular, just the comments and things that were on TikTok. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. But these, if one of the things you can do if you're always referencing the tax code and such, we're in 7701 a lot. So it's good to just print it out so you can look through it and we'll get into some of that. Some of those interesting definitions. I think there was someone that made a comment that said, you know, when dealing with statute or code definitions, either aren't law or they don't, it doesn't matter and all that. Okay. I would just say that's silly. Okay. Why do I say that? Well, because that's part of the law. I mean, they pass a statute and a code, and of course they define terms. Read any contract, any of the contracts that you're signing quickly online, all of them, read them all. They all define terms. They're not loose about their language, and words matter. And so they're disclosing those words. And so in the tax code, those terms govern when understanding what that means. I'll give you an example. Okay. In 1945, the Supreme Court, in the Hooven case, that would be the Hooven and Allison Co. Versus EVAT in 1945. Now, that court case was about something in particular, but within that court case, they made reference to the term United States. And the Supreme Court stated that it may be used, the term United States may be used in one of several senses. It may be merely the name of a sovereign occupying a position analogous to that of other sovereigns in the family of nations. Now, Definition 1 is how we would use the term America. It would include the states as well as the federal territories. It's kind of all encompassing. That's the first definition. Second definition, it may be the territory over which the sovereignty of the United States extends. So that definition, the definition of the term United States, the name of the federal government or the District of Columbia is the United States. Now, when you're in school, students, listen carefully, and your teacher's asking you to define a particular term, and you use that definition, the name, the word that you're defining in the definition, the teacher's going to tell you that that's not proper. You don't define a word using this word in it. Well, then just bring them the Hooven case and show them that the United States Supreme Court in 1945 used the term United States when defining the term United States. And if it's okay for them, I guess it's okay for you. Anyway, it's not okay, but nonetheless, definition 2 is the federal government. Definition 3, it may be the collective name of the states, united, which are united by and under the Constitution. That's definition 3 of the Hooven case. So there are, at least in this particular case, there are at least 3 definitions of the term United States. When somebody asks you, are you a United States citizen, or do you live in the United States? You cannot answer that question without more information. You must ask them, what definition of the term United States are you using, so that I can answer the question. I remember that Hispanic it was the Attorney General, I think under, not with Janet Reno, but I can't remember which administration it was. But anyway, this Attorney General was testifying before Congress. They used the term United States, and the Attorney General says there are several definitions of the United States. Which one are you referring to? So this is a big deal. So with that in mind, I can go to the Hooven case. I'm sorry. I'll go to Title 26, 7701. That's what I meant. And you can go to the definition of the term United States in the tax code. Now, when looking at this, you want to understand, it says in 7701 at the top, letter A, when used in this title, what does that mean? Title 26, that's the tax code. It says, where not otherwise distinctly expressed or manifestly incompatible with the intent thereof. And what is the intent of the tax code? Of course, to get money from you for the federal government. That's the intent. So don't never forget that. Anyway, it says where it's not otherwise distinctly expressed. So these are going to be the definitions, unless it says it's something else. Okay. An amazing thing too in this, and I'll get into the things on TikTok, is that when you go down in this particular code, and it says here under other terms in 7701, it says here, number 28 of 7701, other terms, any term used in this subtitle. What does that mean? The subtitle we're referring to is 7701. So it says, a term used in this subtitle with respect to the application of or in connection with the provisions of any other subtitle, that means all the rest of them, of this title, that's Title 26, shall have the same meaning as such provisions. Are you clear with that? So it's telling you, it literally has a particular number in the terms. It says that the terms are going to be congruent and mean the same thing. So let me show you. The term United States, it says, the term United States, when used in a geographical sense, includes only the states and the District of Columbia. Now, immediately people go to thinking that the states is always going to mean the states of the Union. It does not, because the definition of the term state says the term state shall be construed to include the District of Columbia, where such construction is necessary to carry out the provision of this title. So the definition of the term state in the tax code is the District of Columbia. Both the term United States and state are convertible terms. They mean the same thing. They mean the District of Columbia. If you don't get these terms correct when handling the tax code, you will be incorrect in your understanding. Now, remember what I remember at number 28 that said, it said that the terms used in this subtitle, again, it makes reference that it's going to be congruent with other subtitles in this title. So if you come over here to 3121, which is also definitions, listen to this. The 3121 definitions, letter E, state, United States, and citizen. Here it is. It says here, state. The term state includes the District of Columbia, Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Guam, America, Samoa. So that's the definition of the term state. Do you understand it? It is not New Hampshire, Texas, and all that. Otherwise, it would list it here. And then it says here, definition of the term United States, when used in a geographical sense, includes Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Guam, America, Samoa. Those are not Alaska, Hawaii, and all that. When you look at the tax code, the same tax code, and you look up these locations, and you look back far enough when Alaska and Hawaii were in the tax code as federal territories, you'll notice that it listed Alaska and Hawaii. And the moment that they became states, they removed it from the tax code. Why? Because it means what it says, and it says what it means. If you don't get that correct, you're not going to understand the tax code. This is key. So that's kind of exciting. So anyway, so I wanted to mention that as we get into some of these questions and things that are mentioned on TikTok. So let me see. So on these at the top of these, are these the names of the people that commented? All right. So Lone Wolf, he says Executive Order 6102, there are no non-resident aliens, and the Senate Report 93-549. Again, there's no question here, but there are non-resident aliens. Maybe they're not in the, living in the District of Columbia. Okay. So to understand whether something is or isn't a non-resident alien, you have to understand what these terms mean. Okay. Aliens are juxtaposed to the term citizen. Okay. So an alien is the opposite of a citizen. If I'm a citizen of New Hampshire, if someone's visiting from somewhere else, they would be alien. Okay. In the U.S., I would say the District of Columbia would be the same thing. Okay. If you're not a U.S. federal 14th Amendment citizen, you are alien. It's juxtaposed. If you're not a citizen of California, you're alien. So who are aliens? A citizen is a particular distinction of a particular geographical location in some sense, worldwide. So the citizen would be unique to that area, okay? And all the rest of the people will be aliens. That's how that works, okay? And let me just read. I'm going to read a Treasury notice. This is Title 26 CFR 1.871-4, proof of resident aliens. Listen carefully. This is the law that governs Title 26. So it says proof of resident aliens. Rules of evidence. The following rules of evidence shall govern in determining whether or not an alien within the United States has acquired residence therein for the purpose of what? The income tax. So listen carefully. Here's what it says. Non-residence presumed. An alien, by reason of his alienage, is presumed to be non-resident alien. There you go. Good night. That's the presumption. Okay, that's the presumption in law. An alien, by reason of his alienage, is presumed to be non-resident. Now, what does that mean? Okay, let's first talk about what residence means. To reside is a temporary state. Geographically worldwide, it's the same thing. Now, before I go on to talk about residency, I just want you to know the courts today, for their own purposes and for political reasons, are interested in conflating the terms residence with habitation and domicile. They are not the same thing. Typically, people would have one habitation and domicile, not many. And the courts have established that one of the ways you define habitation domicile, I know it's in New Hampshire law, is that place you intend to return to. What's that look like? That means, like when you're in the military and you join the military at an AFI station in a particular state or jurisdiction, and you leave, and this is where you began your journey, that's where you have your habitation domicile. You can travel the world and reside all over the world for years and years, 30 years or more while being in military service. When you retire, you go back to that place you intended to return to. Now, again, it's talking about intention. So if you don't set up something and cut off what you were doing from before, then you're intending to go forward. You can travel all over and your driver's license can expire, a number of other things. And then you are found dead. It would say so-and-so, formerly of that place that you were from, not where you're living. It would be what is known. If you had a driver's license somewhere, even though it might be suspended, revoked, or expired, that's still your habitation domicile. If you don't set up another one and in essence cut this one off, it's not so much setting up this. Why is that? Let's say you set up this one and you're not allowed to set up this one. This one's still binding. This one's illegal. So you set this up, they mail off and they cut this one off. That's the changing of your habitation domicile. By that act, you can now vote in this state. You can't vote in 2 states. I remember one time I was looking at there was something listed in, I know what it was. It was on the voter registration in New Hampshire. And the statement on the registration says, by voting in this state, you give up the right to vote in another state. I said, that is ridiculous. By voting in the state, I give up no rights. They wrote it incorrectly. They should have written it this way. By voting in this state, you do not have the right to vote in another state. You're not giving up the right to vote in another state. You don't have it. Again, words matter and they mean things. So getting back to the non-resident alien, I just showed you that the proof of alienage is the presumption in law. Now, I just want you to know that if aliens are in America, even though they are aliens, they are presumed to be resident aliens because they're thinking that because they're in America, they're here, but they think that's the United States when the United States in the immigration law is the District of Columbia. Okay? The federal government, listen carefully what I'm going to say next. The federal government does not have the constitutional authority to deal with immigration in the states. How do I know that? Because the word immigration doesn't show up in the United States Constitution. It's not a power delegated to the federal government by the states. They don't have such power. Okay? Is the federal government immigrating? Of course they are. They're immigrating in the United States, District of Columbia. Another reason that I understand that they don't have the power to immigrate in the states is the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. It says, the power not delegated to the United States by the Constitution is reserved to the states and to the people, respectively. So it's a state power, immigration, because these states are nations. They're countries, contrary to the popular pop propaganda. The federal government has no authority to do immigration in the states. Now, any alien that comes into America on paper and gets a visa, they are in the United States, District of Columbia. They're being governed as if they are residing in the District of Columbia because they are residing in the District of Columbia on paperwork, not only in their visa, but also in their tax documents. And most aliens here, if they're actually not living in Washington, D.C., Guam, Puerto Rico, Virgin America, Samoa, are not resident aliens. They are non-resident aliens. In fact, because it says an alien by reason of his alienage is presumed to be non-resident. But what the practice is, if they're here, that's what creates the tax liability. The presumption that's practiced is not what the law says. Now, it also is in a provision in this law where it says, and this is with respect to the alien, this would be the resident alien. It goes on to say that in the case of an alien who presents himself for determination of tax liability before departure from the United States, the presumption as to the alien's non-residence may be overcome by proof. Okay, so then it goes on to down here where it says certificate. If in the application of the paragraphs above of this section, the Internal Revenue Officer or employee who examines the alien is in doubt as to the facts, such officer or employee may, to assist him in determining the facts, require a certificate or certificate setting forth the facts relied upon by the alien seeking to overcome the presumption. What's the presumption? That he's non-resident. Each such certificate shall contain or be verified in a written declaration that is made under the penalties of perjury that shall be executed by some credible person or persons other than the alien and the members of his family who have known the alien for at least 6 months before the date of execution of the certificate of certificates. So if an alien, which is non-resident, wants to overcome the non-residence, the presumption, he has to have a certificate proving to overcome that he's a resident of the United States, District of Columbia. You have to have a certificate of residency, if you will. That's to overcome the proof of non-residence. The same would go with someone who's a non-resident alien. As this states in the Treasury notice, we have our clients that are alien they're not federal citizens, and they have to prove their non-residence. So we would create the same certificate under penalty of perjury showing they're without the United States. That would be 28 USC 1746-1. And this is part of proving with a certificate of foreign status. Okay, that's why the IRS is okay with that stuff, because this is what the law says and this is what it means. Okay, so goes on Denny, who comments a lot in our TikTok account. We're glad for that. He makes reference to quite a bit. I'm not going to read this here, but he talks about the Dred Scott case. And he states, and here's some great points he says here. It says that the Africans came out of slavery because they first made Civil Rights Act and the Africans of that same slavery because they first made Civil Rights Act of 1866 for Africans. But the states were not really following it, so they moralized it in the Constitution, 14th Amendment. He says here, federal U.S. citizens could not have the Bill of Rights, so the 14th Amendment gave them limited rights. Just for the record, Danny, is that the 14th Amendment doesn't give any rights, okay? No such thing as that. First of all, the word rights doesn't show up in the 14th Amendment, okay? What shows up in the 14th Amendment is privileges and immunities, okay? Now, the thing about that is, why is that? Because you see, the Congress, the federal government, or any government, they cannot give rights, okay? Civil rights are not rights. They are privileges. That's the bad thing about civil rights. They're privileges. They may look like rights, but they're not rights, okay? Why do I know that? Because if you read the Declaration of Independence, it says, Jefferson says, when he wrote this, and of course they signed it and agreed all of the unanimously, it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, which color men? All men, that would include men and women, all men, mankind, all men are created equal. They're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so then it goes that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. The only purpose of government is to secure rights. All men have the same rights. There's no man, no living person that doesn't have the same rights. Why? Because they're natural rights, that you come from them when you're born. You have human rights. And some believe that you have rights even in the womb. But the idea is that there's no such thing as that some group of people have rights and others do not. There's no such thing as that. Okay. And we hold this truth to be self-evident. Now, so the federal government, all they can do is offer privileges and immunities. Privileges are benefits and immunities are protections. That's all they could offer in the 14th Amendment. Now, when you have slaves being incarcerated against their will, being held against their will in a land that's allegedly saying that all men are free, did the federal government need to pass an amendment to the Constitution? Well, they believe they did. Do I believe that it was ratified? No, not properly, because the South had walked out. There was no quorum. There was no union. That was the end of the union. That's where many people believed. But you'd have this incarcerated people who wouldn't want to be a statutory citizen, even if they were handing out privileges called civil rights. How do I know that civil rights are privileges and not really rights? Well, first of all, they didn't need to give them anything. The Bill of Rights and the Constitution already protected people. And look to the Constitution's errors and in making reference to that a black man is 2/3 vote, that's immoral. And just because the Constitution says something doesn't mean that it's right and that it's good. Understand, it isn't the law that is determining morality. If immoral people pass laws, you'll have immoral laws. If moral people pass laws, it should only be to secure rights. Now, when we talk about a just government passing laws, their laws are not for free men or for the righteous. Laws are for the lawless. The only purpose of a just law is, one, to bind government to not violate your rights, and two, to protect your rights from others. That's the only kinds of just laws. All other laws are void. All other laws are void. And the only type of law that the statute and code that they could pass are to make sure that government, in their being empowered to secure rights, are not violating your law. So they can bind the government to do this and that. So things in the government can be bound by statute and code. But free men are not obligated to obey laws at all in general. Okay. The only purpose of the Old Testament law that came with Moses was, like Jesus Christ said, to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. On these hang all the laws and the prophets. Makes it pretty simple. Love is actually the empowering action that keeps government at bay. If people love each other, there's no need for law to compel them. That's the reality of that. So anyway, you were making reference to the Civil Rights Act of 1866. So the 14th Amendment doesn't do that. Now, if attorneys are trained to believe that civil rights are rights, then that attorney will be ignorant. What are you saying, Christopher? That a Harvard law, that the education that the attorneys get in Harvard is worthless? Yeah, I am. I'm saying that. Why do I say that? Well, one Harvard law professor, which is who was that? The Harvard law professor. Okay, raise your hand if you know. What's his name? Dershowitz. Yeah, Dershowitz. Alan Dershowitz. He said, and I paraphrase, the federal government can do anything unless the Constitution says it can't. Okay. Well, that's the opposite of the 10th Amendment that says the power not delegated to the United States by the Constitution is reserved to the states and the people. Now, I would agree with Alan Dershowitz that the federal government can just about, and I say that just about, do anything they want in their jurisdiction. And where's that in the Constitution? Well, Let me read it here. This is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the Constitution. It says, here's the power that the states gave to the federal government. And before I read it, let me just tell you a little about delegation of authority. Okay? Delegating something is not a giving away or giving up of a power. When you hire an attorney, you're delegating certain authority to your attorney. By setting up an attorney, he represents you in a certain context. He doesn't represent you at home in your bed. Okay? He's not able to do whatever he wants. He's now not your daddy of your children. It's a specific limited power. Same thing goes with your representative. They don't have all power that way. So the idea is that certain delegated power is what they give them, and the states have the authority to take it back. This whole thing that happened when part of the federal union walks away, like the Great Britain walked away from the European Union, a vote walks you away. This whole idea that the Civil War made it so that we're one nation indivisible is a crock of shit. They celebrate it like that. Saw that in the State House in New Hampshire when they had a never will we be divided again. Crock of crap. The beauty of America is not really even our union and our stinking union government. That's not the best thing of America. The best thing of America is, as the Declaration of Independence says, these are free and independent states. And they have full power to levy war, conclude peace and contract alliances. The federal government is the state's bitch, contrary to popular belief. But if the legislators in the states have no clue of their authority and power, do you think it's going to be usurped? The federal government doesn't have to usurp its authority. The states are derelict in their duty. That's the breakdown. And listen, we worship the union like it's our God. It's bad. And the symbol of the American flag for some is like a cross to some Christians. It's like there's a sense of worship in that. It's bad, folks. It's not good. And it gives those bastards a false sense of security. They should be afraid for their careers. But ignorant people are easy to control. So getting back to the power that has been delegated to the federal government, I'll read it to you. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district, not exceeding 10 miles square, as made by session of particular states, which one? Maryland and Virginia, and the acceptance of Congress become the seat of the government of the United States. You know, that's Washington, D.C. And to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which shall be for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. The federal government is in the state by the permission of the legislatures of those states. And usually the federal government shows up in the states because they're handing out cash. And just take a look at your states. I challenge you here. All right, here, listen carefully. I'm going to give you an assignment, and I want you to get back with me, okay? So look up down the messages below this video, okay? And here's what I'd like you to do. Now, you got to look for your state. But I want you to give me this information because you're going to help me do research, okay? Because I was going to look this up. But here's what I want you to do. In your state, I want you to reach out to your executive council or your state rep, which means you got to figure out who that is for you. Or you can reach out to your governor's office. It doesn't matter. Reach out to your government. And I want you to come back, put your state in the comments, and I want you to tell me what is the percentage of federal money that goes in to balance your state's budget. Let me tell you the bad thing about the federal government. The federal government cannot balance its budget without borrowing more money from central bankers. They don't take in enough tax dollars to balance their budget. They're not even talking about that in this particular shutdown. That ain't happening. So I'm going to look for your state. Help me out with some research, and I want you to tell me. I will get back with you. I did reach out to my executive counsel, and his name is Joe Kenny. Anyway, great guy. He's in my cell phone. I talked to him. You should talk to the reps that say they represent you. Anyway, he told me, and I don't remember what he said to me, but it was something like this. He said that it was, and I don't know that he knew. He was, so I got to check back in with him on that. But anyway, it was something like 40 or 60%. I'm praying it was 40 or less. Okay. But he said it was, I thought he might have said 60%. That means that New Hampshire's, running its government mostly on the federal government. That state will never secede from the union ever because they're not grown up. They're still living at home. Even if they want to live out on their own, they can't because they can't live without mommy giving them some money. The states will never drain the swamp because they're part of the swamp. That's bad. If you had an expectation that Donald Trump was going to drain the swamp, now that, as Ross Perot would say, now that's just sad. So, not going to happen. That I read to you was federal power. The states, by the Constitution, gave to the federal government exclusive legislative authority in all cases whatsoever. This is how the tax code is constitutional in their jurisdiction. So where's their jurisdiction? Federal 14th Amendment citizens are citizens subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So all U.S. citizens, that's a federal 14th Amendment citizen, have income tax liability worldwide. And resident aliens that actually are residing, unfortunately, the ones that are residing on paper are actually non-resident, but the residents that are living, the aliens that are living in D.C., Guam, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, America, Samoa, they also have an income tax liability. And in some parts of the tax code, even worldwide. As long as they have their visa, that means as long as they have a valid visa, they're going back home for whatever it is, that kind of stuff, they too have an income tax liability worldwide. It says so. Read it in 7701. Okay. It says it literally. I mean, I can tell you. Let me just read you that fun part. Okay. About let me just read it to you. It's kind of weird, but it does mean what it says. And it says, okay, here we go. Persons residing outside the United States. What's the definition of that term? District of Columbia. Okay. If any citizen or resident of the United States, that's the two, U.S. federal 14th Amendment citizens, resident aliens, okay. If any citizen or resident of the United States does not reside in and is not found in, that means if they come looking for you, is not found in any United States judicial district, such citizen or resident shall be treated as residing in the District of Columbia for the purposes of any provision of this title, Title 26, relating to, here it is, jurisdiction of the courts or enforcement of summons, and they summons you in your books. That's what it says. That's what it means. Do you understand? Worldwide. I didn't make it up. It says what it says it. There's no argument. So that's just part of that. Want to read the did I pronounce? Yeah, I wanted to read a couple because it was is it C. Marson? He talked about the slaughterhouse cases. I have a case I want to read for that, and and he had some great evidence here in his particular comments. But so I want to read a couple of these court cases. Let me read this Hathaway case. So this is the context of this, okay? It says here, court rulings on federal citizens. Before the 14th Amendment, that's before 1868, in the Maine Hathaway case, it says, for it is certain that in the sense in which the word citizen is used in federal constitution, citizens of each state and citizens of the United States, that's Article 4, Section 2, by the way, are convertible terms. They mean the same thing. For citizens of each state are entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. And citizens of the United States are, of course, citizens of all the United States. There was no such thing as a United States citizen before the 14th Amendment. And so because of like even the Articles of Confederation, where you could come and go anywhere, you listen, if you want to be a citizen of Texas, you just go there, set up house, cut off wherever you were. And so you can move among the citizens of any state if at your whim, anytime you'd like. I'm getting up, I'm heading out. That's a beautiful thing. Try doing that in Europe. But that's the case the way it is in America. Now, listen to this. After the 14th Amendment, when you now had a statutory United States citizen, it says here, and this is the slaughterhouse case that that was mentioned. It says it's quite clear then that there is a citizenship of the United States and a citizenship of a state, which are distinct from each other, which depend upon different characteristics or circumstances in the individual. There's two citizens in the United States. And here it goes on to say the U.S. the Cruikshank case. It says we have in our political system of government of the a government of the United States and a government of each of the several states. Each of these governments is distinct from the others, and each has citizens of its own. Then here you go one. This is after the 14th Amendment. A person who's a citizen of the United States is necessarily a citizen of a particular state in which he resides. But a person may be a citizen of a particular state and not a citizen of the United States. To hold otherwise would be to deny to the state the highest exercise of its sovereignty, the right to declare who are its citizens. That's State versus Fowler. So a person, listen carefully, State versus Fowler recognized, this was back in 1889, that you could be a citizen of a state and not a citizen of the United States. That's a fact. Okay. Here's another one in the DuVernay Ledbetter. It says a person may be a citizen of the United States and yet not be identified or identifiable as a citizen of a particular state. Well, who is that? Who can be a United States citizen and not be a citizen of a particular state? Who would that be? Well, the citizens of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico are United States citizens, and yet they are not citizens of the state. They don't have access to Congress like the citizens of the states do. That's not their House of Representatives. That Congress, with Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, has exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever to govern the citizens of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, American Samoa, Guam, all those. They can just write law that governs them. They not only govern them in their taxes, they also govern them in their firearms. They also govern them. The Second Amendment doesn't apply in Guam, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, American Samoa. The federal government, the federal Constitution says they have exclusive legislative authority in all cases whatsoever. This is why federal gun laws are constitutional, because they're specifically for the citizens of the District of Columbia, U.S. 14th Amendment citizens, and the federal territories, including D.C. The problem is they can't make it look like they don't have the Second Amendment. But that's how it's congruent. How about food and drugs? Have we delegated to the federal government food and drugs? The word food and drugs doesn't show up in the federal Constitution. The power not delegated to the United States by the Constitution is reserved to the states and the people. So what are food and drug laws about? Well, all, U.S. citizens and resident aliens. And of course, the people of Guam, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, American Samoa. Well, how come everybody doesn't know if this is true? That is a great question. If this was true, Chris, don't you think everybody would do that? Well, how many attorneys do you know didn't wear masks? There you go. How many people bought into government lies? Let me ask you this question. How many doctors with a doctor's degree in medicine know how the body heals itself through diet and things like that? They train that way? Not too much. They know how to prescribe drugs and cut out the offending organ. Hey, that's all they know. Attorneys only know how to promote big corporations and move assets from this side to this side, and they serve the court. They're officers of the court. The judge tells them what they can do. Their first allegiance is to the court, not to you or their client. They're not there to secure rights. They're not to take a stand against the judge and say, sorry, not going to happen. I'm protecting my client's rights, Your Honor. Never will happen. The judge has the authority to bar that attorney from even showing up in the court. That's a breach of authority and power, see? But that's what happens when people don't have an education or understand what rights are and how to secure liberty and freedom, right? So again, resident, non-resident is we're talking about residency. Again, it's temporal. To reside means to the thing identified. Here's a truth for you. Okay, most people are out there certainly paying property taxes, but the reason, what's the privilege? Well, because you don't realize that by declaring that your property is residential, now you're functioning within privilege. That's why you're policed. That's why you have fire protection, all these protections. That's why you have safety codes, zoning codes. They protect the value of your property by putting your property in a certain zone. All of that is to protect you. Doesn't really protect you. It protects government. It puts them in authority. It protects the central banker's asset. They like this stuff. That's why it's the feudal system. That's because you're calling your property, you're classifying your property as residential when it really should be classified as private. Come out of the public sector and come and you'll be able to secure your rights better in the private, okay? But understand how government has these limitations. Read the Declaration of Independence. Here's 57 reasons, and we're going to wrap up here in a little bit here. 57 reasons. Thanks for your comment. He says, I would like to know when they're going to start doing their due diligence. He's talking about the Congress and calling Congress out for the unconstitutional laws before they pass the legislation. Well, let me just suggest this, 57 reasons. I believe the Congress is strictly, absolutely upholding the Constitution. They really are. Why? Because the laws are written in such a way that they do all these things, and they can do all these things in their jurisdiction. They can do this in Guam, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, in the District of Columbia. When the states are looking for the money, the regulations are going to come. And listen, they do these things for their citizens. They absolutely govern their citizens. I promise you this, U.S. citizens have more laws governing them that slaves had laws governing them in the South all day long. It's sad. So let me see. How do I see that? Let me see. Oh, here. Let me see if I can check out a comment. All right. Let me see. Here we go. I only see DestinationFreedom.org. I don't see the comment. Do you see the? No comment there. No. So do you see the comment, Michael? So anyway, yeah, I can't see. But anyway, so the idea is that I think they're upholding the Constitution. Now, what's funny about the Constitution is the one party, they all know the Constitution, whether they do or not is immaterial. When one party is losing, they know the Constitution and they believe the other party is breaking it. And so vice versa, they don't know their power.
Yes,
Can you read it?
Saying,
yeah.
How does the property come out of the public into the private? Christopher, is it just a loyal title?
Yeah. So yeah, let me and we're working on those remedies as well. And I don't usually promote remedies that everybody can't use. So we have a lot of information on that, and there's a lot of different things. I just want to say this about it. When you talk about loyal title, okay, loyal title is typically out west of the Mississippi, whatever the states that were part of the Homestead Act, the Bureau of Land Management is where you'll get lodial title from. What that means is you identify your property out west that's part of the original land patent, and you get the Bureau of Land Management to certify the meets and bounds of your particular property within that original land patent. And many of those land patents have been abandoned, and that when the state started issuing title, they just abandoned the proper land patent. In the east of the Mississippi, or at least the original colonies or whatever in this area, there were charters that were granted to those towns that fulfilling a certain condition that the land owner who staked their claim, their certain amount of property, that was theirs once they fulfilled that criteria. Now that was private property, and they would pass it on to their heirs and their assigns, heirs and assigns. That would mean who they sign it over to. Okay, so you might take up your property. This is all, this is paperwork, and become the new assign, especially because it's been abandoned. That's some of the easiest part of bringing your property out of the public into the private. The human aspect is this: your property is a cash cow. Okay, and so at least DeSantis down in Florida, he's looking to release the cows and release those property taxes. That's going to be stunning for Florida. There's going to be a lot of people going there for that. Okay, but anyway, getting back to your cash cow. See, it's the human side that's going to be where you'll have most of the difficulty. You're going to have to do community. You cannot do this process like you're warring. You have to. The pathway to freedom is through responsibility. The more responsibility you take on of your property and absolve the town, the county, and the state of the responsibility of your property and protecting it, you'll gain more liberties with your property. You may determine that the town, the county, and the state can make a claim against you in some capacity, but they'll have to invoice you, and they won't have the authority to take possession of or lien on your property without taking you to court. And all they can do is challenge what service or privilege you utilized. That'd be the only place. Those days, that stuff used to happen, and we've moved away from that in a great detail. So we're working on those remedies. And so you stay close to DestinationFreedom.org, then maybe you'll be a part of making those changes in your state. So anyway, that's the short answer for that. You can go to DestinationFreedom.org and look under conference calls and scroll down. You'll see there's an audio on lodial titles, and you can listen to an hour talk on that subject matter. So maybe that'll help you. So then let's see what else. There's an Until Death Do Us Part 22. I wonder how Death Do Us Part 21 through 1 is doing. So anyway, he was talking about that he doesn't want to be defined, or she, maybe it's she, I don't know if it's male or female. Anyway, so don't want to be defined under any corporate codes. USC, United States Code doesn't define living beings. Definitely never going to be a federal citizen. That's great. U.S. citizens are property owned. Well, I wouldn't go as far as saying they're property. People aren't property. I don't care who they are. They're not property. They may behave as property, or they may be wanting to be taken care of. You'll see this a lot today, where people want to be taken care of like they're babies and whatnot. They don't want to be responsible. But people are not property. But if people want the privileges and immunities, then they're going to be taxed and regulated. Understand, someone has to pay for privileges and immunities. So they allege that there's a privilege in being a federal citizen. I don't know what it is, but. And so they say definitely never going to be a federal. It says EIN, DBA, blah, blah, private trust. How is private trust is how we do it. I separated from my legal name via public notice, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's great. And it's great to come out of the public into the private. Just make sure that if you have a passport or other documents that you have with the government, like your driver's license, voter registration, maybe even a jury questionnaire or your passport, you might be claiming a federal citizen, and you may have to do that differently so that you can break free from those things. So anyway, that's some of the some of the comments that were out there, I did want to speak into some of those. Listen, I really appreciate your you're taking an interest in the subject matter of state versus federal citizenship. I appreciate you liking and forwarding and subscribing. I love your comments, and I apologize for not getting to them all the time. I am making commitments to take a look and see if I can comment in the moment and engage in some of this discourse. It's great. So be sure to like and subscribe. Pass it on if you find this stuff interesting. Pass it on to your friends, and don't forget your homework. Help me out and put your state in the comment and tell me what percentage of the budget the federal government has for your state, and we'll see what we can compile. I'll publish those reports. Maybe I'll do a special video on irresponsibility or at least whatever sovereignty isn't happening in the states. And that'll be an interesting thing. So, well, again, thank you so much for being here tonight. We look forward to seeing you next time on Destination Freedom. I'm Christopher Gronsky. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Do not wish this life to pass away, but life presents such possibilities each and every day. I heard a calling that was right for me. I prayed for strength for what's ahead of me. Show me the show me the way. The sun rose high and burnt the night away. Who stood before me was my enemy. Don't tread on me. He's come to take away my liberties. I'd rather die than be a slave to thee. Don't treat me this way. I'd rather die than be your slave. I will survive. And you feel my rage. It's not a question of being brave. I'd rather die than be your slave. It didn't matter who shot first that day. They killed my brothers.